I see them. The final game of this homestand on Saturday. Here's Broussard centering Ellis. He scores! Two newcomers team up. Ellis is first as a Flyer. Makes it 4-0 Philadelphia.
Well, we talked about how vocal Ellis is. Could hear him yelling for the puck from up near. And Broussard took one glance, made an incredibly good pass right on the tape of Ryan Ellis, and he snaps it home.
Everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.
Welcome back. It is Isaiah with the O&B Puckcast, episode number 156, brought to you by Summit Adjusters, FlyersNittyGritty.com, and of course, Jim South Street, 400 South Street, 40 years of the best cheesesteaks, hoagies, and fries in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. And if you live down there, check them out. And of course, if you can't make it over, they use DoorDash. So we'll have that delicious food right to your door. Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. And with that, let's bring in our panel. Back with us this week, because Chef will be with us next week in our summer schedule, is the great Dan Silver.
What's going on, Isaiah? It is the summer, man. It's feeling good. It's nice weather, like perfect weather, and get some draft to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to take a couple of cracks at that draft. Before we bring on the great Russ Cohen, just a reminder, the O&B Puckcast is on 12 podcast platforms: Apple, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeart, and of course, YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell. And if you would subscribe and give us a rating, we appreciate it. It moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And without any further ado, from off the Post podcast, Locked On Flyers, EP Rinkside, and of course, Sportsology.com. It is Russ Cohen. Russ, how are you?
Good, Isaiah. Dan, how are you guys?
All right, great. And we got to remind people to purchase Russ Cohen's books. Just check out Russ Cohen.
All of them, all 10.
All the books.
On Amazon. I have the baseball one and I have the basketball one.
Oh, awesome. So, you got the basketball one. Nice.
Yeah.
Did you get them signed yet, Isaiah? Or
I'm running into Russ. You know me. I'm a phantom podcaster.
You are a phantom podcaster.
Yes, I am. So, gents, Russ, I just wanted to get your kind of final impressions about the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, it was great seeing all the people in the seats for a change, and the Avs were kind of like the Oilers overtaking the Islanders after their runs, kind of like an '84. That's what it reminded me of from an old timer's perspective. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny. Preseason I picked Minnesota to come out of the West, and I stuck with them. But as the series went on, I never picked against the Avs. I just never had to. And I even picked them to sweep one of the series that they swept. And it was like the reason I really felt like at the time they got to the Cup that they were going to win was just because they had too much depth. The depth that they could roll on all four lines, the puck possession, it didn't even matter anymore about the goaltending. Yeah, they were going to lose games because of goaltending, but it was a team that put up like 4 goals a game. And, the interesting thing was on ESPN, we kept hearing from like Chelios and Messier. And then Chelios changed a little bit as the series went on, Messier not as much, that defense wins. Defense wins cups. It's going to have to be defense that wins the cup, blah, blah, blah. Defense did not win this Stanley Cup. Puck possession did. Goal scoring did, but not defense.
No, but when they needed to,
yeah, of course.
The Avalanche showed you they could win many different ways, many types of games. That is the mark of a champion, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that last game, 2 minutes to go, sure. I mean, even McKinnon's blocking shots at that point. You got to remember McKinnon went back, the year before and said, I've been in this league 9 years and I haven't won shit.
Right.
I mean, it's good when you could be a player like that and sort of exercise your own demons. And, I picked the Avalanche to win it all the year before. And then I was like, I don't know if I can this year because I don't know if they had enough. And so they did prove it to me early on. And it's interesting because look, Tampa was a very opportunistic team. They could pull goals out of nowhere. They could be getting killed in a game and come back and win as they did. And Kemper could give up some awful goals and look horrific. But I give Jared Bednar good credit. I mean, when I was covering games 3 and 4, the one that the one that Kemper lost, the next day Bednar was talking to him. He spoke to him that night. He spoke to him, after the game at practice the day before the next game, and he sort of settled him down. And the teammates were fully behind him. McKinnon was like, listen, we're behind this guy. It doesn't matter what you guys write. I'm just telling you, we are behind this guy. And, even when you're not playing your best as a goalie, which can be very mental, when you have that kind of support, especially from your coach, it really can help a guy pull it through. And then the next game, Kemper was making some amazing saves and really didn't have a clunker of a game after that. He still gave up some bad goals. Darcy Kemper is always going to give up some bad goals, but he won the Stanley Cup.
Oh, yeah. And he's not Anthony Niemi. I mean, he's better than that, right? So,
yes.
Yeah. Dan, any of your last thoughts on that?
What's amazing to me is, and you guys can think about this maybe while I'm talking about it, but I can't remember the last time that in the Stanley Cup Finals that the team with the, fairly substantially worse goalie won the series. Like, I was trying to think about it. I mean, there's a big goaltending gap in this series, right? You're dealing with Vasilevsky and versus Kemper. I couldn't think of the last time. I think you've got to go back like 20 years to when a team with the worst goalie won, substantially worse. Obviously, the Blackhawks won with Anthony Niemi against the Flyers, but the Flyers had Michael Leighton in now.
Right.
So it wasn't that big of a gap. But it just kind of goes to show how dominant the Avs were at times, and they put it all together this year. I mean, their puck possession, their speed, it just overwhelms. And, there's been articles coming out. There was an article on ESPN, about Nathan McKinnon and how, the eating habits that he tries to instill in his teammates. And there's been a lot of controversy about that. And with the Flyers hiring Tortorella, I think, it's sort of a relevant conversation. McKinnon holds his teammates to a very high standard in terms of how they prepare for games, right? And part of that is eating habits. And I think it probably helped them out in this Stanley Cup run. And John Tortorella,
more energy, there's no question.
More energy. And John Tortorella, consistently talks about how hard his training camps are, and they're geared towards getting guys in shape so that you're not tired during the course of the season. Because he talked about on the Snow the Goalie podcast today about how hard it is in season to make adjustments and to better strength training, endurance training during the season, especially the way that the NHL compresses seasons now. And so I think that's something that John Tortorella is going to try and have his team doing, which is what he's always been known for in the past, is getting these guys into shape, getting their habits where they need to be, working on the mental game. And so, not saying the Flyers are going to be anything like the Avs, but it's good that we're going to have a coach that's going to kind of coach to that standard that McKinnon holds his teammates to.
Yeah, well, I mean, here we're going to install a structure, instill a culture. That's the way I look at this season, and that's what they have to do. And of course, I think a lot of it, sometimes it's not the particulars, it's the overall, it's the macro, it's the attitude that you have to do that in every category, and you're going to hold yourself accountable, and that's definitely needs to happen here. So, Jens, we have this thing called the NHL Entry Draft on the 7th and 8th, if I have my calendar correct, of next week. And, the Flyers have the number 5 overall pick. They had Brent Flair and Chuck Fletcher out there today sounding off about their draft plans, and someone must have confused that and turned the sound off. But anyway,
you're not the first person that said that.
Really? But it worked out. If you can get the replay, if you want to catch that. But besides their strategy, I think they're going to take that pick. And it comes down to, Russ, who are the guys that we're going to concentrate on for the Flyers? Who are they going to have a chance to draft at number 5 if we assume that Shane Wright, Logan Cooley, and Juraj Slafkovsky are going to go before the Flyers have the opportunity to draft any of them? And it begs the question, well, who's going to be there? And I came up with a group of names. I wanted you to talk about, Russ, Simon Nemec and David Jiricek. These are right-handed defensemen. And then we have your favorite player, Cutter Gauthier. You have a lot to say about him. Could be a center, but more than likely a winger. We'll talk about that. Joachim Kemmel, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, Matt Savoy could be a center, could be a winger, and maybe Frank Nazar. So that's a good cluster of players I think the Flyers will have a chance at.
And listen, after Shane Wright, because I feel like there's teams that do have such varying opinions on this, you never know. I mean, Cooley may be there too. I doubt it, but I would say I would be very shocked, but I can't say it's impossible. But I'm going to say right now, for this argument, it's not going to happen. So, because I think it's going to go Wright and Slafkovsky, even though I wouldn't do that. I would do Cooley over Slafkovsky, but that's just me. But I think that's the way it's going to go. And so, after that, if we go with Nemec first, the difference between Nemec and Jiricek is, Nemec is a little slicker. I think he's got a little bit more escapability. I think he's a little more polished, and maybe he's going to score more points. I'm not 100% convinced, but I think there's a chance of that. And he's a terrific skater. He's a little better skater than Jiricek, but not anything that you'd worry about. And just a very, I want to say almost finished product. There's still upside there, but it's not a tremendous amount of upside. Jiricek, I feel there's more upside because I just feel like where he's played, even if you watch the World Championships, he had to do a lot by himself. Like I saw sometimes like he was bringing the puck up the ice himself. It was a power play. He's setting up the power play himself and then trying to get it to his teammates and, make something happen, where I felt like Nemec had some better teammates around him where Jiricek, didn't. And you could really see where Jiricek was relied on much heavier than Nemec was. And Jiricek can be a destroyer on a mission sometimes on some of these shifts. He can be very physical. It's hard to get the puck away from him. And he may not have the most accurate shot, but it's very powerful. And he's a guy that will get points just because of, getting the puck in the offensive zone, having possession, making a good play, and then it eventually ended up in the net. So he's going to produce his fair points, but he also plays good defense. Nemec does too. They're both good defensively. I just have Jiricek a little better because of the physical edge that he has that Nemec doesn't. And I feel like because he's that good offensively and has the edge, I give him the edge. Now, when you're talking about Savoy, I do think he could play center in the NHL. I realize there's a chance he can't, and that's fine. He's a really strong guy. Like, some people want to marginalize him and say, well, he's strong for his size. Well, I mean, against this whole class in the combine, like he was doing 15 pull-ups. He was really impressive. He may be at peak strength right now, which is interesting, but mentally, this guy's far and ahead of a lot of players in this draft. If you listen to him, if you can listen to any clips of him at the combine, and I had a chance to interview him for like a half hour for an EP Ringside article, he thinks like a coach. He is always thinking on the ice. He's always figuring out his next move. He knows when he gets the puck where it's going to go next. He is a tireless worker on and off the ice. He's got a great shot. He's a really good skater. He's going to get some points. And so whether he's a center or not doesn't matter to me as much, but I think there's a really good chance he's going to be a center. And so I feel like there's some extra value in that. I love Lekaramaki. I think maybe has the most upside as a goal scorer. It's going to take a little while because he's got to round out his game. And I feel like the hockey IQ is good, but I think it could be a little better at times. But, man, you saw in the under-18s what he could do and just create offense quickly. And he's got just a tremendous shot. And he also has a great nose for where offensive plays are when they're going to happen and sort of break. And I feel like that's a big deal. Kemo's really good. I've let Karamaki a little higher because and it's not because of size. I know he's a couple inches taller. Kemo's, again, got just a lethal wrist shot and is a good two-way player, and he's terrific in the offensive zone. Like, he's just, again, going to be a very high-caliber player that way. But I just feel like because Lekaramaki has a little more upside and the fact that he can play center, whether he does or not, again, we're going to say that about a lot of players in this draft. That's, why I have him ranked like that. Lazar is great. I think he has a good chance of being a center because of his creativity. He might be the most creative out of all the guys that, we're talking about here. The way he can make things happen in open ice, the way he can kind of make guys miss and then sort of get things going on the rush and make a great pass and also bury it. But the thing is, he doesn't bury it enough. But even so, I have Nazar even ranked ahead of Gauthier because of that unbelievable creativity that he's got in the open ice. Now, Cutter Gauthier, I get it. He's going to go higher than I expect because somebody's going to try and turn him into a center. I don't think it's a good idea for the Flyers to do that and hope he could be a center. Now, listen, as a winger, he'll be a terrific winger. But now if you're telling me that you're getting this guy and you're going to hope he's a center and you're going to watch him at BC and hope for the next 2 years that he's a center and then he gets there and he's not a center, well, then you've definitely lost some value there. And he definitely needs to work a little bit more on his defense. He does work on it, and it's not bad. He, again, can make some plays, can do some things in open ice. He's got one of the best shots, if not the best shot in the draft as far as just accuracy and being deadly with the wrist shot. And he does like forearm curls. Like, that's his secret for that. He does like hundreds of forearm curls. So he is super strong that way. But you'd like to see him be able to do that more and take over games a little more. And that's something where he hasn't done that enough, even at the NTDP. He'll make you come out of your seat a couple of times a game, but I feel like he could do that a bit more. So that's why I have him behind some of those other guys, because I need to see that. And again, right now, thanks to Instat, they get some stats that other outlets can't. This year he was at 46% for faceoffs, and it's going to get harder moving up the ladder. Generally, unless you do just an unbelievable amount of work, your faceoff percentage is probably not going to get much better. And if you look at it, like Connor McDavid's faceoff percentage is not good, but nobody cares because it's Connor McDavid, and fine. If he doesn't win a couple faceoffs, he'll end up with the puck anyhow, and he'll still put it in the back of the net. But if I'm looking at Gauthier and hoping he's a second-line center, he's going to have to win a fair amount of faceoffs. And so if he's a center, there's a very good chance, he's no better than Kevin Hayes as a center. And that's, and you see what happens with that as far as, Hayes is a second-line center. Some years it looks really good, some years it doesn't. So I feel like there's a little bit of an uphill battle with that one, and that's why at 5, I'm not willing to risk that, especially when all these other guys are going to be on the board. And especially, like if Jiricek's there, I don't even know why I'm even thinking about the rest. Now, I would think about it with Savoy because, honestly, I would have no problem taking Savoy number 5, easy. So I think there's a good discussion to have there then for the 2, because obviously the Flyers are going to need both, because the Flyers are lacking playmakers too. When you lose Giroux, you lose Voracek, you've lost a lot of playmaking, and they haven't made that up yet.
And zone entries.
So that's a guy that you could get in maybe 3 years that you could start making up some of that playmaking. So that's why they have a deficit in both spots, and that's why it'll be interesting if those are the guys. But with Seattle going 4, I'm pretty sure they're going to look at defense too, and so that's where Nemec could go. I mean, it's possible we can go 3 to Arizona. There's talk of that too. So if he goes 3, then it is possible that Seattle goes with Jiricek and the Flyers don't get a shot at that. And if that's the case, then that's when I would move on to the other players that we just talked about, the offensive players, and consider what you're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, if Arizona is going to trade Chychrun, you would think they might default to getting a defenseman, so that could be a chain reaction right there.
Yeah.
I would beg to differ a little bit about faceoffs. I remember Sean Couturier was a 98-pound weakling when he came in. He wasn't really that great at faceoffs, and now he's one of the best guys in the league. So, I mean, it can happen. And I think
it's just it doesn't happen very often.
Okay. Fair enough. Dan, what are some of your thoughts? I know you have a lot of passion for some of these players, and you've checked them out yourself.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it certainly feels like there's a lot of smoke with the Flyers and Cutter Gauthier. I mean, I've seen a number of folks. I think Corey Pronman in his mock draft had the Flyers taking Cutter Gauthier at 5, and that was kind of before Gauthier started shooting up the charts. This was like a month ago. And Bob McKenzie in his draft preview, which also had Slafkovsky number 1, and I think he's gotten the number 1 pick right many years in a row. But anyway, he also had Cutter Gauthier at number 5. Now, he says that his rankings are based on what all the scouts are telling him with the rankings.
Actually, like 10 scouts. That's what he said.
Yeah, 10 scouts. I will say that in the past, he has been very accurate with who goes in one spot. And it's hard for me to believe that maybe he's not in tune with some of the scouts or some of these specific teams because, most rankings didn't have Gauthier top 5. So I feel like he's also the kind of player that Chuck Fletcher might take a swing on because if he can stay at center and with the shot that he's got, he's just been a really high riser. And by the way, the Elite Prospects draft guide is terrific, and Russ Cohen contributed to it. And I think he had Cutter Gauthier as the number 1 shot in the draft, right, Russ?
I did.
So, and the number 1 power forward, I think, in the draft.
Yeah. And actually, you have a really good commercial on the site, so that's funny that you.
They used a tweet of mine last year to promote the site. Actually, a guy in Sweden emailed me about that a couple weeks ago before the ad even came out in the U.S. to promote the draft guide. But anyway, so I feel like if the Flyers keep the pick, there's a fairly good chance it's going to be Cutter Gauthier. And look, their scouts have watched these guys a lot more than I have. Russ watches a lot of hockey, so I'm sure.
This year I've seen Gauthier a lot live, probably like 5 times.
Yeah, so Russ has got a really good idea of him. So the fact that he's saying he likes some of these other guys more than Gauthier, gives me some pause.
And it doesn't mean Gauthier is bad. He's a hell of a player.
Right, and who knows how these guys are going to develop. I mean, one of the things about Gauthier is that he's already pretty developed physically, which I think a lot of the people like. But also that means there may not be as much physical development left. Correct. So,
the guy he gets away at the junior level with, in terms of his physicality, might not translate as well. And this is something that a lot of players have had trouble with because they can't push around the bigger guys.
Right. And now, before I go on to Jiricek.
But he doesn't score a lot of goals that way. I'll just say that. I don't think that's a big issue for him.
Okay. Yeah, it's his shot. Before I talk about Jiricek, I mean, the other thing with Gauthier is that there's always these debates with the U.S. national development team has so much talent. And there's always these debates. It was like the year that Jack Hughes played on the line with Wahlstrom and Farabee. And Farabee was always kind of looked at as the third wheel, the third producer on that line. And when I watched the games, I always thought Farabee was kind of contributing more to the success than Wahlstrom. I had Farabee rated higher than Wahlstrom going into that draft.
I did too. Sure I laughed at when I told people I thought he had an elite shot. Yeah. And some people were like, Joel Farabee? No.
And so it seems like, Farabee's probably had a better career so far than Wahlstrom. But the same questions are going through people's mind. Logan Cooley, who's probably going to go top 3, he played on the same line with Gauthier a lot of the year. And so a lot of people kind of view Gauthier as riding kind of the wing and being, the trigger man for Cooley, who was a really good setup player. But there are some scouts I know who think that Gauthier actually was more of the engine on that line than Cooley.
I think it was 50-50. From what I would see, definitely the first part that you talked about happened, but there were times where Gauthier could just take the puck himself and make something happen too.
Right. So it's always kind of tough to tell with that. I liked Jiricek a lot. He's got the big bomb from the point. It's an interesting contrast between him and Nemec, as Russ alluded to. Nemec is more of like the Cam York type of player. He makes the right decisions. He's very slick with the puck. He doesn't have a big shot, but he's very fluid. The way he plays is very fluid. Where Jiricek is, and he's not going to be as good as, but the way he plays is a little bit of, with some development, he's almost like a smaller version of Shea Weber a little bit. He's got a bomb from the point. He's physical, obviously not as big. But then it's interesting. I went back and looked at Shea Weber went in the second round of the draft. So like I get rid of Kuhl for saying that his upside could be something like Weber. He's going to go top 5 or 6. Weber went in the second round. But anyway, that's who his style of play kind of reminds me of. He's got a bomb from the point. He's very physical. To me, there's a lot of projectability. The elite prospects draft guide, which is all about projectability and upside, had Jiricek as the number 2 ranked player in the draft, which is higher than he's been ranked anywhere. So for me, and with this organization's need,
that's where I am.
Yeah, with this organization's need for a right-handed defenseman, I would be a little disappointed if he's available and they pass him up to take Gauthier. But there seems to be a lot of scouts that are falling in love with Gauthier, and so there's got to be something there too. But to me, it's probably going to be one of those 2 players that the Flyers take based on everything that I see and hear and read.
Yeah, I think the best point you make, and it's the point that I would make as well, is when you're talking about Jiricek, he's just going to be more impactful in a game than Gauthier could be game to game because he's going to play more minutes. He's going to play on your top pairing, and he's going to be in on more action. Like it just doesn't. That's just the way it is.
Let me. Jiricek, Alex Pietrangelo. Is that more of a similar?
Yeah, I think it's similar. I think better offensively, but not as good defensively.
Okay.
Pietrangelo was pretty exceptional defensively.
Is Gauthier kind of similar to Tyson Foerster in some ways?
He's better. Foerster, yeah, Forster's got that great shot, but Gauthier, his shot's a little more projectable at the NHL level. Like Foerster was always like this. I don't want to say it was like a tornado of a kind of shot with the torque and everything, but the release point is a little slower for Foerster than it is for Gauthier. So that's
okay. Just trying to get a rangefinder for the fans.
How does Gauthier does he? I don't think he's as good a skater as this guy, but how does he compare with like a Jeff Carter type of player?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is if you remember at the beginning, and I remember that's when I first started really covering the Flyers full time. I would kind of rip Carter as a rookie and for a little bit because he kind of only had one move down that right side, and if he didn't do it, nothing else happened. And I think he's a guy that over one summer really did develop that extra speed, which gave him confidence. His moves got better. I do think there's some Jeff Carter in him, and I would say right now Gauthier is a better skater than Carter was at the beginning for sure, and maybe still even now, even in the middle of his career when he was excellent. I think he's probably the better skater because just edge work has gotten so much better with players that I think that's the big thing, and the explosiveness now. Like there's an exercise called a lateral jump that these guys do, and it's like it works the lower body. It works, the quads, the hamstrings, everything, but it's all geared towards explosiveness. And so now I've had at least 3 players tell me this year that they're working on that. And so when I start hearing things like that I hadn't really heard a lot before, I kind of know that, wow, we're now getting into like the nitty gritty of just becoming just elite skaters. Because now there's going to be a time when we look at the NHL and everybody's going to be close to an elite skater. And we're not there yet, but it's going to be like that someday. And compared to, 15 years ago. So And it's, and a guy named Reed Schaefer I just interviewed, he's another one that told me that. He's a big guy. He's a power forward. He's kind of like similar to Gauthier, but he doesn't have the same kind of offensive talent. But just the idea that these players are all looking to do that. But the most impressive thing for me with Gauthier was the forearm curls. This guy is just doing that all the time, and that is something that Shea Weber did a lot. And Shea Weber had just unbelievable strength in his shot. Now his was more of a one-timer, but with Gauthier, it's his wrist shot. Like, you remember that trick shot with Weber that he did from like the other end of the ice and like the 300 level.
Yeah.
Goal. Like, go try and do that and see how far the puck goes when you shoot it. You know what I mean? Like, that's where you could say, hey, Gauthier can really do some great things because he's probably not at the full physical strength for that. He might be for other things, but he's probably not for that yet. So, yeah, I could see this guy being a 35-goal scorer. I can. But the problem with this NHL is it's nice if you have a center that's a 35-goal scorer, but you better be able to play defense and win some faceoffs too. And that's where I get back to, like, here's a funny thing. And I'm not suggesting it will ever go this way, but Connor Geekie is an excellent center. Now, he's got an ugly skating style. He knows how to get from A to B. He's really smart, and he's a tremendous center. He's smart. He's got a great shot. He knows how to play make. He's very cerebral, but he's really got to work on that skating. So he's not going to be in that top grouping because of that. And he's 6'4". But I'm just saying, if Connor Geekie's skating were up to par, you wouldn't even be talking about Cutter Gauthier because the Flyers would be like, I think we want him because it would be like a better skating Sean Couturier.
Okay.
But nowadays with the skating, that really can knock you down a little bit.
Well, the Flyers are taking their share of players who needed help, needed some work.
Scott Laughton needed the most help.
Yeah.
And now he's a pretty damn good skater.
Oh, yeah. His north-south is one of the best on the team. So let's panel this pick here. Why don't we go with who do you think the Flyers are likely to take, and who would you take? Dan, let me start with you.
Yeah, so I would like them to take David Jiricek if he's available. I think they're going to take Cutter Gauthier.
Okay, Russ?
I think they're going to take David Jiricek if he's available. But, again, I would have the biggest argument with myself between Jiricek and Matthew Savoie. In the end, I really could take either for this team. I love Savoie. I might actually take Savoie because I don't know where I'm going to get another terrific playmaker in the next while. I don't know if I'm having the money to sign Johnny Gaudreau now that you see what Kevin Fiala's making. Flyers can't spend $10 million a year. They just can't. So, like, where am I getting a playmaker like that? So that's a tough internal battle.
Is he kind of like a Barzal type?
He's not the slick skater that Barzal is, but the problem is with Barzal, he's not even close to the two-way player that Savoie is. So Barzal's offense has struggled as a result of trying to play in Trotz's, very defensive system, and it kind of unraveled his offense a little bit, where Savoie would be able to do that. Wouldn't be a problem because his two-way game's on par already.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, look, from my perspective, I don't follow it as close as you two guys, and I don't want to come off as some, like I'm some kind of expert, because I'm not. I'm just a fan, like a lot of people watching this team. They need centers, they need wingers, but you only want to take the best player. You can't be swayed. If it's close, of course, you're going to go with your need. I feel most comfortable with Jiricek. I think he just makes the most amount of sense. They're waiting for Ryan Ellis, and they've been waiting for Ryan Ellis and Matt Niskanen and whoever could come along as a right defenseman for the longest time. And I think if you got a shot at a guy like that and it meets a need and is also in the range of where you should be taking him, by all means, go and take him. If, however, you can't get him, say Arizona takes Nemec or Jiricek, if you really think Matt Savoie has the highest ceiling of whoever is left, that I don't have a problem with that, because I don't know where they're going to get a facilitator, because Morgan Frost, I don't know what's going to happen there. Their power play is awful. They're going to need that guy. And if Russ, you can tell me, is he a good zone entry guy? Because if he is
a good zone entry guy. He's
that is a super big important for the Flyers. So I would go with Juracek.
Remember, Matt Savoy is 5'10", and Cutter Gauthier is 6'2", and the way the Flyers are thinking right now is they like the bigger players, and that's where Dan's probably right about this, where he's getting more consideration because he's bigger and stronger. Doesn't mean it's right, but it just means that's where the organization's head is at.
Yeah, and you know what? I'd be fine with Gauthier. I think you said he could score 35. He may not be a center, but you really need that guy. That's okay. But really, to me, Juracek is the guy that's like, okay, this guy, as long as they develop him right, he's going to be a player, and they need that player. So
you really can't get Juracek on the open market. Like, if you really think about it, where can you get that guy in the open? Even Ryan Ellis is not that. Certainly Niskanen is not that. Like, where are you getting that? You know, the Flyers got Chris Pronger once upon a time, but already well into his career. Where could you get a young guy like Juracek that you could have for 10, 15 years at that position without bankrupting your team? Like, it's hard. It's near impossible to do.
Yeah.
The only thing that's close is when Montreal was dumb and they traded Sergachev.
Right. Which made up for the Duran mistake, right?
Right.
Right. What a draft that was.
And you mentioned Ryan Ellis. I have to say, at this point, can we all at least agree that this is a serious injury?
I mean, he played 4 games. He played 4 games. And I tweeted out today, when I listened to Chuck Fletcher, and he met with the media with Brent Flair, like I mentioned earlier, he made it sound like he was Humpty Dumpty. They got to put it all back together again. And I was like, wait a minute. When you had core area problems, hip problems, he made it sound like it was all of it. You generally need surgery.
Right.
How can you strengthen? Like, we're still at the strengthening phase. A year later, I mean, they are waxing the proverbial carrot in my – look, I don't know. Look, I'm not his doctor. I don't see the medical charts. In my experience, what are they doing?
I'm looking at this saying this is a pretty serious injury because he's been doing all the strength training and might do it, let's say, a month before training camp, and then maybe hits the ice. How many games do I think he could play? I mean, I can't slot him in for a whole season. Mentally, I just can't. It might happen, but I can't do it.
It sounds like some sort of chronic type of bone or soft tissue thing that there's no easy surgical solution. And I've played hockey for my whole life. I'm at a much lower level. I had a chronic pelvic issue that prevented me from playing hockey twice for a year in a row. And it wasn't until I finally found some Australian therapist who properly diagnosed it and helped me kind of do 4 months of rehab to kind of get over it. And it wasn't surgery I needed. Obviously Ryan Ellis has a much higher level of care than I do, but doctors are humans. I mean, the problem is we don't know, right? No one is being forthcoming about it. There's all these rumors. Oh, well, maybe they want him to get a surgery. He doesn't want to get a surgery. Like, who knows? The problem is that they want to do an aggressive retool. And if this guy's not around, I mean, first of all, they can't do one anyway. But if Ellis is not around, and then they're going to go out and probably give up a third-round pick or a second-round pick to get someone to take JVR's salary, even though they have no chance of being a cup team next year. Like, the whole thing's preposterous. But anyway. Yeah,
a lot of it's preposterous. And the only other thing that's kind of preposterous is, aside from Carter Hart, like, they're 4 core players. Farabee, you don't know if he's starting the season or not. Couturier, hey, it's great that he's skating. He just had major surgery. I think he'll be okay. Kevin Hayes has a lot to prove still. And then you're mentioning Ryan Ellis. Like, that is a key part of this team.
And it screams to me, it's like, why don't you just be transparent, drop the aggressive retool nonsense,
right,
and keep JVR and sell him at the trade deadline, put up with him.
I'd buy him out. I don't even know if I'd want Torts to coach him. I think to complete the culture change, and this isn't like JVR is not a bad guy, but JVR just, I think, represents mediocrity, unfortunately. And, because he scores at bad times. He's not getting a lot of key goals. He's not great 5-on-5. These are all things that Torts would eventually harp on him for. I think if you buy him out, sure, he scores 20-something goals for somebody else, but he's not in your locker room. He's not taking up time away from a younger player to develop or whatever. I just think that's a better thing to do culture-wise, just to do that. And then, but again, if we even take away JVR, let's say you even, like Dan said, you get the whole salary gone. Great. And let's say they do sign Morgan Frost, which I'm kind of worried about because I think they're going to wait till the Monday after the draft now to say something, which makes me wonder, like, are they going to do a sign and trade at the draft? I don't know. Like, I would have had him signed already, talking to Torts already, and figuring out where he's slotting in next year because they need bodies. But we don't hear anything about Morgan Frost, so I don't know. So, like, if I was going to slot in the Flyers now, like, if I was going to put together the lines and put together the D pairings, which I'm sure Tortorella's doing on some level just to have an idea, it's not pretty.
No.
Well, I mean, to be fair, though, Frost is a restricted free agent. I mean, Owen Tippett's in the same exact spot. Wade Allison's in the same exact spot. I think we're all just kind of assuming those guys are going to get signed. But I agree that with Frost, maybe there's a higher possibility that they might try and move him. Like, I don't think they're going to trade Owen Tippett.
They're not trading Tippett.
Or Wade Allison.
Allison's an interesting one because if a doctor there, because, again, they've supposedly revamped all the medical, they could look at him and say, I know you love this kid, and unless you're okay with him being like the captain of the Phantoms for the next 3 years and maybe occasionally playing in the NHL, because he hasn't played more than like 35 games. Yeah. It might be hard to re-sign him. It might be.
That brings us really to that whole thing that Charlie O'Connor tweeted out, like the whole concept of the aggressive retool, like I was just saying. It's just like, however you want it, like you want to get rid of JVR. I mean, it's clear cap, but you maintain young assets, keep your draft picks, and let Tortorella do his thing. However you want to spin that or tweak that, that's fine with me. But that's how I feel. And if they just be honest, and Dan, it looks like you want to say something in that regard.
No. I was just going to say it's clear that Tortorella is here for the long haul. Like, you listen to the interviews, and he clearly understands that it's going to be some time, right, before this team is like a cup contender or whatever. Like, I would just don't go overboard with trying to make this team that much better for next season. Like, increase your chances to get a Connor Bedard, or a Mitchkov, or an Adam Fantilli. Like, there's three like super players in next year's draft. Yeah. Increase your chances to get that. Let the young kids develop more. Like, but the problem is that I feel like Chuck Fletcher is sort of managing with this pressure on him that if this team isn't good, that he's probably the next on the chopping block. It's a terrible spot to be in because I think we all know. And Isaiah, you said, well, why can't they just be transparent with the JVR thing? But I think that I think that they want to get rid of him and they may move a pick to do it. Like, I think that Comcast expects this team to be a lot better next season. And
that's the thing. Comcast is pushing, the ticket sales are down and they're looking for ticket sales. And that's why we keep hearing that they're going to sign a big name no matter what. See, if it were me, I would be like, I'm not signing a big name. I would sign a couple players, sure. I also would want to have cap maneuverability at the deadline. So this way, if there's some team that can't afford a player that's got a couple of years left and I could get him, and then if he's really good, I could extend that player, I have the cap maneuverability to do it. The Flyers aren't going to be that way. And that's a shame because that's when you can pick up somebody that really could help you for the next 4 or 5 years. And you can't do it because you're not in a position to do it. So teams aren't even looking at you to do it because you have no cap space.
Well, that's just it. If you're coming off a 61-point season, and I always thought, okay, even if everything went right, it was only going to be at top, like 80 to 85 anyway. If they didn't have all these injuries, it just isn't a big top side with them. And you're also capped out. That's the worst of all scenarios.
Like if you're the Avalanche and you're capped out, you're like, okay, you won the cup. You do your best to get back, but you won the cup. But when you're in the Flyer situation and you're almost capped out, yeah, that's when it gets really tough. And look, again, here's another bad scenario. The other bad scenario is you're going into July. I think we all felt it, and I'm sure Dan felt it, like you'd have a better idea of what's going on with Ryan Ellis going into free agency, but you don't. So you can't count on his money being LTIR, or if you do, it's maybe for half a season, and then he's going to try a comeback. So then you're going to have to do something at that point. So then what are you going to do? You're going to probably put Cam York at that number 2 spot, whether he's ready or not. Like you're going to say Torts is going to get him there, right? So and you're still going to need another defenseman.
Well, that's the thing. Are they going to rush out with this? This is where I think the so-called aggressive retool could really backfire. What if they say, well, we need someone who's not going to crater like Provorov has cratered on the first pair 3 out of the last 4 years. Now, if they took the right approach, they would try and let Tortorella and his coaching staff coach him up, hang on to the player.
I think he did good the last 20 games of the season, Provorov, actually.
I agree with that. But if they feel like they can't count on Ellis and they can't count on Provorov, does that mean they're open to trading Provorov to get a guy who is more steady, who can maintain his presence on the first pair? And it's almost like, here you are. You're letting go of younger talent. And for a 27, 28-year-old defenseman who's not too much older, but still, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it looks like.
I think the problem is if you're going to trade Provorov under those circumstances, if you're still going to get a top pairing guy in return, it's going to be an older guy. It's going to, and this is what Chuck says he won't do. But again, that's what teams are going to offer you, that 30, 32, 33-year-old guy that could do that job, not anybody younger.
But this goes back to Ristolainen. I mean, that was the worst. That was the worst re-sign.
It could be, and it could be great if Torts gets the most out of him. But I think the one thing you know for sure is he's not going to be a top pairing guy.
Well, no, but if you could have a first round draft pick at the trade deadline for him, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I'm not even talking about what it costs to get him, but to double down on that and take up $5 million when you know you might need a replacement for Ellis, and he is not that guy. What are you doing?
I know. Well, I think there's this awful amount of hope being put into Ryan Ellis that maybe I don't, and the fan base just doesn't have that as much hope. We don't equal the hope that the management has on that one.
Well, hope's not a plan, but
no.
No,
I mean, it just seems that way, right? It just seems like it's all going to work out. Don't worry about it. Like, you remember when your parents would say that to you? Honestly, that was a dice roll, wasn't it? When your parents would say that to you, sometimes they'd be right, but a lot of times they'd be wrong too.
Yes, sometimes that toast actually was burnt, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, but now I think we're at a higher level of concern here for things that are a lot more important. But moving along here, so we're not sure what the Flyers are going to look like. On draft day, we're gonna find out a lot. But the big story so far, like you say, the new face of the Flyers replacing Gritty finally is John Tortorella. And Russ, you covered him. You remember him back from his Rangers days, and you had some.
And Tampa, I covered that cup too.
Yeah, and I remember. I had just moved. I was living down there during his tenure in Tampa. So you kind of have an inside look at where he's been, what he became in Columbus, which I thought was a better version of himself, and what he's talking about now. He's done a really good job of PR. But at the end of the day, he's still John Tortorella, which I think is a really good coach who checks a lot of boxes for them. No doubt about it. But what if you wanted to say caution Flyer fans, or maybe just prepare them is maybe a more fair way of saying it, what would you say?
So I think with Torts, if you go back to when he first took over in New York, and there was a different kind of pressure than when he was, a cup guy with Tampa. You remember he had that water bottle squirting incident.
Yes.
And he got in trouble in the game for that. He's not going to do that anymore. He's not going to get caught berating players anymore. Still doesn't mean he won't, but he's not going to get caught berating them. He's gotten a lot cagier as far as having this nicer image come out of him on a PR basis. But he's still a tough son of a gun. And yes, some players love playing for him. There's no question. And others, who was it? Oh, it was, Matthew Barnaby had said when they signed him, he's probably sure that players were talking and some may not, care to play for him. And it's because of what Dan said. It's going to be the hardest camp of your life. And if that's what you're not used to and you're at a point where you don't want to do that, you're in trouble, right, as a player, because now that's what's facing you. Now, fans are fine with that, and they should be. Like, he is going to hold them to a different standard, but while he's doing that, like John said on the call, he's never run anybody out of town. Well, that's not true. If you remember Marian Gaborik, he kind of got run out of town in New York and then won a cup in LA, right? So that's one example. There's many examples. But
Dubois almost seems like a guy that he ran out of town.
Well, if you have that shift, you don't want to be there. I can't blame that on Tortorella, really.
Yeah. Well, fine. But there's been other guys too. And actually, there's a video of John when Vinny used to be a Flyer, used to be Tampa.
LeCavalier?
No. He was on the Flyers.
Prospel?
Vinny Prospel scored a 30th goal, I think, and he was sort of celebrating on the bench, and Tortorella just admonishes him while everything's going on. There's a video of that. He's not going to do that anymore. And Prospel, I thought, there's no way Prospel's ever going to play for this guy again, and he did with the Rangers. So, hockey players can be weird. We look at things differently than hockey players. Like, we as in fans, media, they're different kind of people. So I think for the most part, they respect him, and he does a good job. And he's the most winning U.S. coach for a reason. Like, he wins. But I also think that you could look at him, and in a month, he might say, hey, this guy doesn't fit my system. And you're hoping it's not Ristolainen. And then, so that's where, you could run into some trouble where there's players like if you have JVR on that roster, John Tortorella doesn't care how much you're making. John doesn't care about building up your trade value. And if JVR is not doing what John wants him to do, he's going to sit. And then you're going to have zero trade value, even worse than it is now. So that's, a risk that you're going to take going into the season with JVR. And then just other players, you're going to have to play John Tortorella's way. And so someone like Travis Kneckney, that's going to be a big learning curve, because I don't think we've ever seen Travis Kneckney play great away from the puck. But John Tortorella is going to want you to play really good hockey away from the puck, and then he'll put up with everything else, whether you're getting penalties because you're feisty, or once in a while you take a dumb penalty. But he's also going to want that 25 goals that Travis Kneckney is supposed to give you every year at least. So I think that's a guy that also could struggle under the Tortorella system. A guy who could really be helped is Sanheim. But again, the Flyers are in a weird spot. If you help him too much, can they even afford him the next year? Like, can they even let him ride into the off season if they haven't extended Travis Sanheim? That's another big question, because again, their defense is far from set. So that's where you have to look at things logically. And Torts will get some guys to play great. And unfortunately, someone like Nick Seeler will probably play 40 games again, because, Tortorella will like the way he hits. And at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of movement on that blue line.
Well, you heard Elliot Friedman talk about that. What a galvanizing moment it was for the Flyers last year, which to me speaks to how pathetic everything. I don't know if you heard this, Dan. The moment with Nick Seeler versus Delorier in Minnesota, when he fought him, and Delorier was a tough guy, and he got the better of him. That made an impact on the Flyers and had a big effect on impact on whether they signed him or not. To me, I'm like, well, those are the
He's a great guy.
That's the prism of a 61-point team.
But he is a replacement level defenseman. You can find them everywhere. They grow on trees in the NHL. They're not hard to find. And they had to make sure he was locked up for 2 years. Like, it does show you where the mentality is at sometimes with the team. And so you hope that changes. But this year, I don't know. I can't see him not playing at least 30 games.
Yeah, well, at least I don't have to watch Yandel. I'll tell you what, though. Nick Delorier is a guy I would like to see, because he can actually play, kills penalties. Yes. He's a real tough guy, but he can drive play a little bit. He'd be a good ad for the Flyers.
But they have Zach McEwen, and they're going to say, well, we like Zach McEwen. And the crowd.
Is Delorier a winger?
Yeah, but, the issue is he fills a similar role, except Delorier could actually score.
We have so many wingers. We don't need to add any wingers.
No,
it's just if you want a guy who can play, who's a tough guy, who can kill penalties and give you some real quality minutes, he's an upgrade. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And Delorier is a character.
We can't afford an upgrade, Isaiah. Have you looked at our salary cap? We're not upgrading anywhere.
Well, that's before we get rid of JVR for.
I know we're going to trade our first
Morgan Frost
to yeah.
No, he wants to trade the first round pick.
I'm interested to see how Frost. I think it's hard to predict how some guys are going to react to Tortorella, right?
I think Frost will actually react well, and I'll tell you why.
I was actually just going to say that I think that a guy like Morgan Frost, who's going to be pushed to be in shape and playing really well away from the puck, like if he's so good with the puck on his stick, like if he could ever get that away from the puck going, and he's still relatively young, like that could be a big boon to his career. Russ, you just said, they're not going to trade the first round pick. So you don't think there's any chance they're going to make a move for like a DeBrincat that?
No.
Okay. That's good.
No, I don't think that's happening. But with Frost, what's interesting is that latter part of the year, he was playing better away from the puck. He was back checking pretty well, and he was winning faceoffs. Like he was showing he could play the center position. I think what Tortorella can help him is, like you said, he is really good with the puck, but probably needs to have a little more confidence and make better decisions. And I think Tortorella can help him with that. And I think they need that. The Flyers need that in the worst way because they need as many high-end guys as they could get. And they just don't have enough of them. And Frost could still turn into that. I know some people have soured on him, and I wouldn't. But like I said, I'm just worried that they haven't locked him up yet. The other thing that I thought was a little weird was – and again, I'm only talking about locking him up for the year, right? Like it's just give him his 1-year deal. It's a cheap deal, but just get him in the fold. The thing that really worried me is I would go with Fedotov and Sandstrom. Thanks. My mind's going bad now. I would go with both of them as the backup. I would not spend any money on a backup. Now, if for some reason this team is having a magic carpet ride and it's unbelievable and you're in it at the trade deadline, then fine. Go get your prorated backup and be happy. But there's no reason to spend any cap money on a backup because, again, that's another roster player you could have had.
So I'm going to talk about the goalies really quickly because my idea, this is not necessarily what I would do. It's definitely not going to happen. But for me, if an aggressive retool for me would involve the following things. One of them would be trading Carter Hart because here's my thing. My thing is that literally the only way that this team can become a cup contender soon is by taking huge risks. True. Ivan Fedotov has been one of the best goalies in Russia the last few seasons. There is a 5 to 10% chance that he could come into the NHL and be close to what Shesterkin is for the Rangers. 5 to 10% chance. It's a low chance, right? Mm-hmm. But there is a possibility. Mm-hmm. So if you could get a lot for Carter Hart and then you want to take the risk that Fedotov is going to be some kind of star, if you want an aggressive retool, that's the kind of risks you're going to take. The other guy I would trade is Travis Kneckney because he makes $5.5 million. And I think that there's a 20 to 30% chance that guys like Owen Tippett and Wade Allison and maybe at some point Bobby Brink can pick up the slack and produce like Travis Kneckney. So now you're going to get stuff for Kneckney. You're going to open up cap space and you've got a 30% chance that one of these guys could turn into Kneckney pretty quickly. So if you want to have an aggressive retool, you got to take risks. And to me, those are the kind of risks. I'm not saying I would do it, but I'm saying that's what I'd be looking at if I'm looking at an aggressive retool.
Well, I'm on board with you with Kneckney. Obviously, I would do that in a heartbeat. I get what you're saying about the goalies. If nothing else, I would have to wait until midseason or at the trading deadline to make that decision. Because, again, if you put Carter Hart on the docket for the trading deadline and you say to teams that he's available, you're going to get a ton of interest.
You're right.
So I think, but then at that point, you're going to have a pretty good idea if Fedotov can stick or not in this league too. And so or if he's going to need a lot more development. So I think that's fine to look at. I'm not afraid to look at that either, just to see. It probably doesn't happen, but it's fine to look at. With Tippett, he needs that shooting coach so bad because you saw he was scoring goals when he didn't think about it. The minute he had a second to think about it, he wasn't scoring. He'd get it on net, it would miss, he missed a lot of shots. I mean, let's face it. He's got a great shot, but he missed a lot of shots. And so somebody has to correct that within him. He can't come back the same way he was last year, because then you're really talking about a 12, 13 goal scorer. And that's not what you wanted to get back in return for Claude Giroux, besides future picks that you hope do something. So, and with Wade Allison, like, you know, we all love him. He's got to prove to me he could at least play 50 games. He hasn't proved that yet. So, but you're right. Out of the three with Brink 2, yeah, I think you probably could make up the Kneckney offense. I wouldn't put Brink in the NHL this year. I really do feel like the strength factor has to get worked on. And if he's killing it in the AHL midseason, fine, bring him up. Or even, you know, a month and a half into it, bring him up. But you got to give him that chance to sort of go down there. And again, the biggest, and I mean the biggest pet peeve right now that I have with this team is there is no information on what the plan is for Lehigh. Even when they were talking about coaches today, you don't know who the head coach is. Is it still Lappy? I don't know. You don't know who the assistants are. There is no general manager of Lehigh Valley. There is not.
That's something Shane Malloy talked about. You know,
you don't know who some of the players are going to be. You don't know players. Are they even targeting certain players? I mean, Lehigh needs a complete redo. Like, I was even just tweeting with Patrick Williams, an old friend who is the most, the best AHL guy out there. And he said they need a tremendous amount of work, yet we don't hear Chuck talking about them at all. So that's another part of this equation, that if you are doing an aggressive retool, you have to do an aggressive redo of Lehigh too. Yep. And we haven't seen any evidence of that yet. Yeah.
Andrew Binek maybe coming here based on his relationship with Chuck Fletcher, and maybe a lack of opportunity for him elsewhere.
I mean, I think it would be great if he did. I don't know that that's going to happen. That's certainly could be one of those steps in the right direction. I suggested also Perry Pern, who was with Torts in New York, and he's doing like 3-on-3 camps for that 3-ice league right now. And he's tremendous. He's good offensively. He's good defensively. He's just good all around. He's still 70 years old and spry, and this guy knows hockey. Like, you need someone that actually has even more experience than John at times, so you could get through to him. And I think, I think him, like anybody else, could get headstrong. And I think Perry would work great with him. I don't know if they're talking to him. I think it would be a good idea if they did. I also brought up Mark Recchi. I feel like if you brought Mark Recchi back in the fold, how could he not help the power play? I just feel like he probably could. I feel, I don't think the Devils utilized him, and I'd bring him back.
Okay. Some good thoughts there, because the Flyers are open for assistant coaches, and they have to do something about Lehigh Valley. To me, last year was a real cluster F, and it's not. They can't repeat it.
I don't think I'd bring Ian LePerrier back as coach. No. I don't think he could do it.
No, I and this guy in Lehigh Valley. That nice guy, great guy.
Yeah, great guy. If you want to do something else in the organization, fine. But the coach of that team is very important now.
Absolutely.
You're not getting better if Lehigh stinks, or you're not getting better fast enough.
No, because they have a lot of young talent ushering through right now. They're talking about development. Now you got to walk the walk.
That's the other part of it. And I know Shane talked about it, but it's true. You can get on Hextall all you want, but he loaded this team with prospects, and Chuck has been in charge of a lot of these prospects, and a lot of them aren't developing. And so you've got to make sure player development gets better.
Well, absolutely.
I haven't seen any evidence of that just yet.
No, I think I still think that's 50-50 so far. But right now, definitely, it's up to Chuck to change it. And nobody's really satisfied or impressed with what they've done so far. Maybe Danny Briere can be someone who spearheads some of the changes there. Maybe that's
and maybe
how that turns out.
Here's an outside thing too. It's possible at the draft day table that Danny Briere talks to everybody and says, I see a lot of myself in Matt Savoy, and look what Martin St. Louis was able to do with Cole Caulfield, and you passed on him. Maybe we shouldn't pass on this guy. I'm just saying that because there is some Matt Savoy in Danny Briere, some Danny Briere and Matt Savoy. There is.
Right.
And he knows what that kind of player has to go through.
That could be a mind meld. You never know.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I mean, that's where you hope the positive for Briere could really work. But I don't want him to get elevated to the point where he's the next GM next year with 1 year of experience. I don't think that's a great idea either.
No, it needs more time. You have to go through the processes, just like a player in a lot of ways. So, gents, I think we're going to leave it there. Russ, thanks for coming by. Why don't you tell people about what you're up to in addition to some of the things we already mentioned?
Okay, so on draft day, I'm on the SiriusXM draft day show pre and post. So I'll probably talk about a lot of the background of players, and I've gotten an interview. Like in my top 20, I've probably spoken to 15 of them, and many of them at length. So I do get to learn a lot about them in these articles, the prospect articles I do. Anything else, just follow me at Sportsology on Twitter. DM me if you're interested in books. You can go to sportsology.com and find some really great draft stuff there too. I've been, I probably did 30 draft articles this year, maybe more, and then also doing rankings. And I still have like a final ranking that I'll put up on Sportsology and a one mock draft that I'll do on Full Press Coverage. So those are coming up.
OTP coming back this week?
Yeah. We're going to have Shane Malloy on. So we're going to tape that on Monday. And so that'll be the last show we do for that type of, draft show before the draft. So, and then, I'm sure with the Hockey Buzz Buzzcast, I'll, be giving out draft stuff right up until Wednesday. I leave Wednesday. So, but yeah, that OTP will dig into the draft one last time for that show.
Fantastic. It's always great to have you on, Russ. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. It's fun. I'm happy to talk about it. I think you guys have a good outlook on things. I think you should never take things at face value, whether you're, the team's telling you that or not. I give Dan credit because I felt like at some points he was fighting maybe a little too hard, but I think the fight is good because I also think that you shouldn't take this and say, yeah, I'm going to just hope things are going to get better. I think you do have to be vocal at times. And I do think that that's the right way to do it because, and John will be vocal too. I think that's why he's a good coach for this, but none of it gets better without, other discerning voices. So that's where I think you're valuable, Dan.
Fantastic.
Well, thanks.
Dan?
Yeah, we love having you on, Russ.
Well, thanks.
And it's it is, I think, we're all, there's some folks who have some podcasts who are maybe a little bit younger than we are. It's, you get to an age and you've seen so much. It's like, it's hard to, you see through a lot more of this stuff. I mean, it just seems like there's so much dysfunction with this franchise. Right?
I get it. If I was 19, 20 years old and Torts got through with that press conference, great. I would want to run through a wall too, but I'm not at that point.
That's it.
We can't let Ryan Ellis run through a wall. That's one thing.
No.
I don't even know if he can run.
True.
Yeah. So that we'll leave it right there. Dan, where can people follow you? Because you're going to be away next week when we come back.
Yeah. So folks can follow me on Twitter at dsilver88. And yes, I'm going to be in London next week for work. So I'm going to have to try and find somewhere where I can watch the NHL draft. It's going to be about 2 or 3 a.m. London time, I think, where the Flyers.
There'll be people watching. I know a guy out there who coaches a team, and he seems to be able to watch NHL games.
Okay, well, I may have to reach out to you, Russ, to try and figure out where I can watch it. But also, apparently, there's a Flyers bar somewhere in London, which I've got to try and find it. There's someone posted on Twitter like a painting outside of a bar that Bobby Clark was on it. So I got to try and find that. Maybe they'll Friday night. Maybe they'll be watching.
If you DM me, I'll ask the guy. He's a coach out there. I'm sure he knows where to go.
Yeah. Thanks. I'd appreciate it.
We're gonna catch up with Byron Defoe on Twitter or something like that.
So.
Anyway, you can check me out on Twitter at Isaiah ISAIAH_520. Isaiah, don't forget the _520, and of course the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck at O&B Puck on Twitter, and of course on Facebook. And with that, everybody, until next time, take care.